Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Greetings. Today we are starting a new uh, session series, and one that has been requested a few times in different places, um, for us to possibly work in exploring the past lives of Lord Buddha, the Jatakas, namely. So today happens to be the first. Finally, uh, this is it. So we're starting, and my hope is that it will be encouraging, it will be intriguing in the sense that it brings up a sense of a deeper connection with the Buddha and what he taught, and how his teachings are relevant to us, meaning they have something that we can make use of. So this will be a different uh, kind of uh, teaching or sharing the Dhamma, where it is not intended for, one student said, serious practitioners. So this is for everyone, and including teenagers and any of you who find yourself sometimes, not able to follow or catch up to what the adults might be saying or the serious practitioners might be talking about. Nevertheless, the teachings that we will be covering through the Jataka stories are very meaningful, they're very powerful, and very useful. So this will be in a much more relaxed atmosphere, which I'd like you to be interested in listening to the story and see what you can get out of it, what you can find to be useful in understanding life, and what you can use from it. So it's today, for today's being the first week, Jataka story. Sometimes they're called Jataka tales. Story is a better version, I think, because these were teachings that the Buddha gave in while he was teaching. Let's say something happened, and students came and asked, Bante, uh, why did you say it like that? Or why or how did it happen that this was like this? Could this have a background story? Could this have a, some things that we don't know of that are, clear to you? And in many instances, the Buddha would himself uh, begin to call the bhikkhus, the monks, over and say, by the way, monks, do you know why I said this? Do you know why that occurred like that, took place like this, etc.? So we have hundreds of them, and without getting into too much, serious, like background, scholarly language, I just want to dive into the one that I selected for today, and that is the Maha kapi Jataka. The Maha kapi Jataka is about a monkey, an ape And not just any monkey. He was a great monkey king. So this happens to be the Maha kapi Jataka number 407 for all those interested in going and looking it up online. There's different numbers because some translators have chosen different numbers. Other places, I think I've seen it be 217, another place 153, depending on who's writing, but usually, um, you know, they all agree that this is number 407 in the Jatakas. So the great monkey king. One day, the bhikkhus were gathered around the Buddha, and the Buddha was teaching in a place called Savatthi, which is a very well-known location in India, especially in those days, because it was the place where a famous lay disciple, lay that is not monk, had donated an entire land and built a monastery on top of it to house the Buddha, to have a place for the Buddha to go to live, him and his monks, and for the laity, for folks to go and listen to the Buddha, make offerings there, etc. So he stayed there for more than 25 years, at least 25 vassas, or vassas are the rains retreats, or a 3-month period where the Buddha did not move around country in India, which was a huge place and still is. So he would stay there. So he's known to have stayed there for 25 of those seasons, teaching. And this happened to be one of those days. So the Buddha was known to really cater to and help out his relatives. He was always giving instructions, helping out when people came to, they were dealing with stress, they were dealing with difficulties like people are today. Maybe you are as well. So hopefully this, you'll be able to get some things that you can apply in your life. So the bhikkhus, the monks, were talking amongst themselves, and they were saying, wow, the Buddha cares about his relatives so much. Look what he said over there. Well, look how he helped over there with his cousin. And many of his cousins were princes, like Lord Buddha was. So he, when he went back as the Buddha, when he became awakened, many of them were so impressed, because this was not Siddhartha Gautama they knew, they grew up with. This was a different person. Something had happened in him. And they felt it. They saw it in his eyes. They saw it especially in his behavior. And they said, whatever he has, we want some. We want to also find that peace, that coolness that he has now. He's not agitated as much. He's not as he was always different, but we know that we want that. We want to become like him. Wise. So many of them left their family homes and their princely status, riches and wealth, and they went and became bhikkhus as well. So over time, many of them kept coming back. Not all of them became monks, but many of them did. But the Buddha was known to always help out his relatives, not just his relatives, but everyone. But on this occasion, the monks were talking about how the Buddha was helpful to his relatives. And the Buddha turns to them and says, do you know as to why? Or do you think that this was only in this life that you're seeing me helping? And they say, when the Buddha says something like this, it's like an invitation to more teaching. And the bhikkhus were always thirsty to hear more, to be inspired more, to learn something new. So they say, yes, Bhante, please, could you tell us? And the Buddha tells them that long time ago, long time ago, in the city of Benares or Varanasi, modern day India, which is in the middle country, it's called, on the northern side of India, but it's called the Madhya Pradesh, middle. You have Ganges flowing through it. Very famous city. It's been around for thousands of years. So he says there was a king by the name of Brahmadatta, and he used to like to go to his huge forest park, all greenery, all beautiful nature, and he would take the plunge into this cool water, the river that would flow. He loved this area where there was a river flowing, and it was a nice area where it was calm, and he just loved to bathe there, to swim, frolic in the water. So it was a big event. So the army, the soldiers, his guards would go beforehand to secure the place, to protect the king. But also they would put nets on both sides as in they would cover the flowing when the water is coming down. So they would draw a net in the water so that if there's any fish, none would come and bother the king as he's swimming. And similarly, they would put another net on the lower end of where he was. So they would put two. So nothing comes up, upstream. So the king, because he's the king. So one day he is swimming. Excuse me. But before that, let me tell you about the nature around that place. Now, there were a group of monkeys. Remember, the title of the Jataka is the monkey, the great monkey king. So there was a monkey. He was an unusual monkey because he was very strong and he was very brave. Because sometimes you can be strong but not brave. So we have to make a distinction, differentiate between the two. So he was both strong and brave. And he had around him a big family of monkeys, his subjects. And he was the king, they were the subjects. There were 80,000 of them in the Jataka, it says. 80,000 monkeys who loved him except for one. One monkey, another male, used to also always see him, the king, Maha kapi, as his nemesis, as his enemy. So he would always try to do something to make him look bad in front of the 80,000, but he never succeeded because his place, wherever he was coming from, his heart was dark. The king's heart was pure. So the enemy, the other monkey, couldn't overtake him. He couldn't overcome him. He couldn't get rid of him. So he would just keep quiet and hide always. Pretend that he was, one of the good guys. So there was a favorite hangout. There was a place for the monkeys to go and eat food. And if you know anything about monkeys love fruits. They love to eat. They love to frolic. They love to keep moving. They're agitated. When we start meditating, what do we say usually? The mind goes berserk. The mind goes all over the place. And we say, what? How do we describe that? We call it a monkey mind because the monkey jumps from branch to branch nonstop. So the monkeys, being monkeys, they used to do that a lot. So there was this one particular place, specifically a tree, a mango tree, that was so huge that it could house 80,000 of them. You can imagine 80,000 monkeys, just like chaos, right? So sometime earlier, the Monkey King sees that he sees and he knows how valuable this mango tree is and how important it is for them to survive. But he also knew about people. Now, this mango tree was so huge, it had two long branches. They were almost like a tree trunk itself, and it was already a big tree. So one branch would go over land, across the, over the bay into the forest. So it would branch out. And the other huge branch would go all over and across the river, but it wouldn't reach the other side of the river. Now, the Monkey King, being wise, he said, because there's mangoes all over the tree growing, especially on the branch, the big branch that's extended out into the river, over the river. He gives the command to his monkeys and he says, this is dangerous because if any mango falls from the tree branch, it's going to be taken downstream by the river current. And people are going to find this special mango. And they're going to wonder where it's coming from. And then they're going to come here. And they're going to perhaps kill us. They will probably, steal our food and get rid of our home and maybe even come after us. So let's avoid that by making sure that that branch doesn't have any mangoes on it. So, because they loved him, because they knew he was wise, the monkeys followed his instructions and they completely cleaned up that area of the branch, big branch. So there was that includes the mangoes and the tiny little flowers that turn into mangoes. But someone forgot to look underneath one area of the branch. There was a tiny little mango growing. And because it has this very tasty, sweet smelling nectar, tasting nectar, ants come around. And that is what the ants will eat. So there was an ant nest built around that specific small mango. So it gets covered and the other monkeys don't see that mango and they forget about it. Now time comes where the mango grows and it's so big that it can't hold on the branch itself, on the branch, and it falls. So it falls into the water and it comes all the way down. Remember those nets? Now it's happening on that day where the king is taking a swim. He can't see the mango because he's in the water, he's enjoying because there's the nets holding anything to come from reaching the king. So at the end of the day, the king gets up and he's completely refreshed and feels so happy. And he goes back to the court, having had a wonderful day. Now, his men who are now collecting the nets, they see this huge fruit, but they don't know what it is because it's unusual. So they take it, and because it's smelling so good, they take it straight to the king. Now the king sees this and he smells this and he says, this is delicious, but what is this? So they call over the man in charge for the forestry. The king had the gardener, the king had this, the king had generals, but he also had specialized people with special skills who had different departments in his kingdom. So one of them was the head of the forest area. So he knew what tree was what kind of fruit it could give, and what time of the year, etc. So he comes and he says, oh, my lord, this is mango, but this is an unusual size. I've never seen something like this. He says, mango. The king had not eaten any mangoes before, I guess, that time. And in India, you find delicious mangoes, not just in India. So one time I was in Hawaii and I was hiking through the woods, and I was hungry, and I didn't have enough water with me, and it was very hot and humid. And as I'm walking on this trail, all of a sudden I see on the ground a mango. much smaller than what we have in this Jataka story. It was equally delicious. I didn't even, remove or peel the skin. I just ate it like that. It was delicious, and it had such a deliciously strong aroma, fragrance. Anyhow, back to the Jataka. So the king asks this man, his forestry special person, is it edible? Can we eat it? He says, oh yes, my lord. And he says, okay. So the king pulls out his knife and cuts a piece. And he first gives it to this man because he wants to see if it's poisonous or not. He's the king. He wants to be very careful. So he has to see when that man tastes it. So he did taste it, and he goes, oh, this is delicious. Mm. And then the king takes a slice and he eats it, and he goes, wow, this is a fruit. And he shares it. It's so big that he starts sharing it with the others in the court. And now he says, I want you to go and find the source of this mango. I want more. What tree is this from? We want to go and get it. So they go and they find out where it is, and they say, it's a huge tree, Lord. So the king goes. So he does a major expedition with his men, his guards. So they go, soldiers and everyone. And he sees the smell of the tree is so spread, pervading everywhere in the forest, that they just keep smiling, everyone. They're so happy. In fact, they're so happy that they go and start eating the mangoes. So they're having a buffet of mangoes, enjoying themselves. And then the king says, well, this is a nice shaded area. Let me sleep here. So they make a nice tent, nice area for the afternoon nap for the king. Now, as he's sleeping, the monkeys start coming from the mountains. The monkeys don't stay put. The monkeys usually get up in the morning and they go looking for something, for action, maybe different type of diet, different type of food, different trees, and then they come back to their favorite spot, which in this case for these monkeys happens to be the tree. So they come, and now they see all these men. And remember the king monkey, the great monkey king? He's wise. He sees this and he says, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. These are men now. They are here because they want our mangoes. This is it. That we're done. At that moment, the king wakes up because of all the noise. You have 80,000 monkeys around you sleeping. You're trying to sleep, rather. They're not sleeping. And the king, in panic, tells his guards, his generals, go ahead and kill every one of them. Every one of those monkeys. I want them dead because look at them. They're coming after the mangoes. They're trying to eat the mangoes. This is ours now. That's what people do, right? We like something, we want to grab it. We don't ask, maybe this belongs to someone else. Let me go and ask if it's okay for me to take this. Now, the Monkey King sees this, and he sees the guards pulling their arrows and they're about to shoot, and he's afraid because these are his loved ones, his relatives. He quickly starts running, looks around, and he has to be a quick thinker. When you become powerful, when you're becoming strong, in order for you to be truly brave, you have to count the effects, the consequences of your actions. If I do this, what will happen next? If I do that, what will happen then? It's like playing chess. You have to think a few steps ahead so you don't get to be surprised. So here the king says, the only way out, because if I let my monkeys down to attack humans, they're not going to survive. They will die for sure because every one of them will be shot by an arrow. Okay, so going into the forest is not the way. I know the way, he says. I'm going to run over that thick branch that goes over the river. Remember the branch without any mangoes? So he runs. It's so long that it crosses almost to the edge of the river, but the river is wide, so but none of his monkeys can jump that far from the edge, from the tip of that branch all the way to cross to land away from the arrows. He says there's only one person who can do that, and that's me, because the king was very strong, remember? He says, I will do it. So he takes a big gulp of air and he goes back and shoots himself over that branch, and he lands on top of another tree on land on the other side of the river. So he's thinking, he's calculating, because he also has to be smart. You can't be brave and not smart. He pulls out a vine and he counts. He's thinking, okay, this, and he's crossing. It's like, if I that much I need to get to take this vine to tie it against the edge of the tree branch so that my monkeys can cross, because none of them will be able to jump that distance. It's so vast. So yes. And he says, okay, if I tie the other end of this on my waist, I can jump back. I can make it. He's so certain of himself that he can make it. And he cuts the vine, but he cuts it a little bit short because he does not calculate the distance or the length of vine that's necessary to wrap around his waist, tie it up. So it comes out to be somewhat short. But he doesn't think about it. He doesn't know about it until he takes off. He jumps again from the tree, top of a canopy of a tree, and he flies and he lands. He's about to land, thinking that he's going to land. And then he sees that the vine, the rope around his waist, is not going to allow him to land on the branch. So he's a quick thinker. He quickly thinks, I'm going to fall into the water if I don't stretch out my arms and really lunge towards the tree branch. And he's able to grab hold of the edge of the tree branch. And he does hold, and he calls out for his monkeys. He says, come, now is the time for you to cross. 80,000 monkeys rush, and they see what's going to happen, because 80,000 people or monkeys are going to cross over his head, his body, his back, his spine, and his legs, to cross over and grab over that vine, that rope, and that's how they were crossing. But every single one of them, because they loved the monkey king, their king, so much that they bowed to him in respect, because they did not know if they were ever going to see him again, because they knew how much of a sacrifice he was making. But in order for them to be saved, he had to do that. And that's what a brave person does, especially a leader. In this case, the king, their leader. So every one of them passes, 80,000. Now, meanwhile, the king and his men are standing at the bottom of the tree, seeing this, and with their mouth gaping open, they're like surprised, they're shocked. They're like, how could this be? So they're curiously watching. No one is shooting their arrows, thankfully. But they're just mesmerized. They're like, so every one of them crosses, goes over the head, the back, and the body of the monkey king. Guess who's left behind so far? That evil monkey. And he sees this and he says, And the king calls him. He says, now is the time. Come, come. You're the last one. Come. He says, yeah, I'm coming. And he says, I want to make sure that he does not survive. This is my time. This is my vengeance. This is my time to shine. This is my time to get even with my enemy. Meanwhile, the king had no issues with him. He had the issues with the king because of his jealousy and rage and anger and all that. So he climbs up even higher and he says, this is a good distance. and he jumps with his feet strongly, pouncing on the king, on the monkey king, crushes his back to the point where his rib cage, his backbone cracks, and his heart shatters. The monkey king. And then he sees this, that there's now blood's coming out of the king's mouth. And he says, aha, I've done my deed. And he goes over the king's body and crosses over that vine and all the way to safety. Now the human king, the Maharaja, Brahmadatta, is watching this. And then finally, the king looks up with his eyes already. 80,000 monkeys went over, you know. And he sees, okay, everyone is safe. He looks over and he says, ah, now is the time. And he's about to fall. Meanwhile, the king sends his men with a rowing, with a boat. He says, make sure you save him. You save him, the monkey king. So they help the monkey down before he falls into the water. So they take him back to the king. And the king makes his men wash the blood away of the monkey king. And because he had his bed stretched out, the king, already for his siesta, he makes sure that there's a nice sheet, and then he covers it up with the cover, like a saffron piece of rope. He puts it on the bed. And the king himself gently puts the monkey king on top of the bed, his bed. And he says, why did you do this? It's a story. And, you know, monkeys and humans, elephants, we might not speak the same, you know, language with our tongue and teeth and mouths, but nevertheless we feel. So let's take the story in that fashion, as this communication, how it went. So the king is saying, why did you do this? I saw what you did. Why sacrifice so much? And he says, great king, you become a king by caring for your subjects, by showing love, by showing dedication, by showing selflessness. Otherwise, why even become a king? So this monkey was now teaching the human king how to be a king. So he gives him advice in how to be tolerant against his enemies. Of course, knowing what the enemies are doing, not to be blind to them. You're not being a fool, of course, to what the enemies are thinking or doing or planning, and taking steps towards that. But especially to make sure your doors are always open for you, those who need you, who care for you. So afterwards, finally, the tormented monkey king closes his eyes and dies. And the king, Maharaja Brahmadatta, tells his men to, he takes them to the court, and they arrange for a stupa, the chaitya, to be built, place where they can cremate and you know, the body of the monkey. And he gives the monkey a royal funeral, to the point where even the queens, his wives, have to have to come outside and walk in procession all the way to the funeral pyre with their hair all wet, disheveled, which is a sign of mourning, weeping for this monkey, because he tells them the story of how this monkey sacrificed himself. And eventually they cremate the body, and they bring the skull back to the king, and the king pays homage to the skull out of respect, and he places the skull, he puts jewelry on top, and he puts it on the entrance of the city palace, and they celebrate that for 7 days. This is a story where the Buddha told his bhikkhus about this, and he turns to the bhikkhus now. You can imagine how they're moved by this story. He says, bhikkhus, do you know who the king was? And they say, no, Bhante, we don't know. And he says, that was Ananda, the king, Brahmadatta king, the king who cremated the body of the monkey. Do you know who that other monkey was who came down and then jumped and killed the great monkey king? They say, no, Bhante, we don't know. He says, that was Devadatta, the Devadatta that you have around you. Devadatta was the Buddha's, in his life as the Buddha, his cousin, brother-in-law, but at the same time, someone who had come and ordained, had become a monk with some of the princes, relatives of the Buddha, as I mentioned in the beginning. But he had a very strong jealousy. He was an angry, rageful person who tried to kill the Buddha at least 3 times, and then he tried to break the monks, the bhikkhus apart, the sangha, what we call the sangha, to break it apart. And he did. So he says that evil monkey was the Devadatta that you know very well. They go, and he says, do you know who the great monkey king was? And they're like, says, that was me. That was me, he says. And the monks, the bhikkhus, are very much delighted in hearing the story from Lord Buddha's mouth and inspired, and they practice even more. So today, I wanted to share this first of the Jatakas, and we'll see. Maybe do this every 2 weeks or a month, or maybe even if I have the energy, maybe doing it every week even. So I will not elaborate. I will not go in deep aspects of the Dhamma or Buddhism as such. But if you have any questions, you can send them my way, and either through the website or through the website at mindreleased.com. So may the Dhamma grow with every bit of interest you show in it, through, even if it's just curiosity, to know what is that? Well, let me go look into it. Maybe this Jataka story will open up doors for you to look into more Jataka stories. So these are intended to help you grow healthy, emotionally, mentally, physically, and especially socially, by the people that you spend most of your time with, and how you think about yourself and those around you. And see if you can take some of those qualities of the great Monkey King with you, whether in your relationship with your parents, with your loved ones, with your friends, with your teachers maybe, with your loved ones. And see if there's any element, any aspect of the Monkey King that you can learn from and maybe even bring into your life, like you start behaving in a similar way, in doing things for others. Maybe not jump from a tree branch to cross the river and things like that. However, there are simple things that we can do that seem to us at times that they are that difficult, but maybe not. Imagine how it felt for those 80,000 monkeys to know that someone was saving them. How about if you were that person? If you did something not for 80,000 people or to all your friends, but maybe one person needs you in a certain way, needs you without you having to sacrifice your principles, your virtue, without causing harm to yourself or to anyone else. Maybe it's some type of a service, or you need to listen to them when they're in pain, or maybe you need to say to them, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. That can mean so much to them. So that's my invitation. May you be well. May the Triple Gem bless you and your loved ones and your families. Sukhi Hotu. Till next time.